morning, everyone. Dear students, parents, and teachers. We are extremely honored to have amidst us world-renowned archaeologist Dr. Nizamuddin Taher, former Director, World Heritage and Monuments, Archaeological Survey of India, New Delhi. He's a good friend of my good friend, and that makes him a good friend of mine too. Dr. Taher, I was always fascinated with the study of archaeology right from probably my college days. Maybe it had something to do with my staple diet of Indiana Jones, like I was talking to you some time ago, or Lara Croft from Tomb Raiders, or Robert Langdon from Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and the like. So I'm sure with Dr. Taher, history literally comes to light. I'm indeed very privileged to introduce Dr. Taher to all of you. Dr. Nizamuddin Taher has completed his post-graduation from Osmania University in Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology from Osmania University. He also holds a PG Diploma in Tourism from Nagpur University. Archaeology and tourism, both are my favorite topics. Dr. Taher has been conferred Dr. Honoris Causa by the Caucasus International University, Tbilisi, Georgia, for discovering the relics of martyred Queen Ketevan. In fact, I had the good fortune, I was just talking to Dr. Taher, I had the good fortune to visit St. Augustine's Church in Goa, where Queen Ketevan had achieved martyrdom. I think she resisted being converted to Islam. The history goes something like that. And some of her mortal remains, it's presumed that they are preserved there. And Dr. Taher has to his credit several national and international publications. He's conducted several workshops, received innumerable fellowships to visit and study the conservation and management of World Heritage Sites. And what he said was absolutely right. It is not just archaeology, but it is the conservation of it and management that actually are more important. He also has the experience of working in the world's largest art museum at Louvre Museum in France, among other national and international projects. He's an advisor in heritage management and tourism related projects for Goa tourism development. And more importantly, I think he loves interacting with students. And thank you, Dr. Taher, for so readily acceding to our request without a moment's hesitation. Thank you so much. We at Delhi International School have regular guest lectures from people from different walks of life who share their perspectives, and learning becomes so much more meaningful to our children. In fact, our guest lecture segment is called Thought Provoking Tuesdays. Our principal, Mrs. Vijaya Nagarajan, will also briefly, very briefly, because we need to talk to you, we need you to tell us something about archaeology which our children are wanting to hear. We'll tell you a little about our school and also share some of the initiatives that we have undertaken to ensure that the kids under our care have engaging, enjoyable, and enriching experiences. Thank you, Dr. Taher, once again for being with us today. Mrs. Vijaya, could you just highlight some of our achievements and something about the school to Dr. Taher?
Thank you, ma'am, for introducing me in those elaborate adjectives. But still, I'm waiting for Principal Ma'am to communicate, and then we will have a hands-on archaeology.
Thank you, Dr. Taher. A very, very good morning to you, and we are indeed privileged to have a person of your kind to be with us. Dr. Taher, before it is my privilege to introduce to you what are the various activities we have been doing in online. As you know, COVID is a situation which has brought us face to face with a very big challenge, which none of us teachers had ever foreseen, that we would have to teach to a computer screen and we would have to see our children on a computer screen. It was very difficult to fathom initially, but then luckily our tech team has done a fabulous job, and they had literally handheld each one of us and trained us on how to take online classes, and of course even helped our parents to understand how the child should be attending classes online. And along with that, of course, our very tech-savvy teachers have taken to it like a fish takes to water, and they have been able to further improvise on it. And we have brought our online classes to an altogether different platform. So therefore, many parents, very satisfied parents, very elated with the kind of activities we have been doing online. They have recommended our school to many other people, and where many schools have been losing out admissions due to virtual classes, Delhi International School can now boast of nearly 90 admissions this year through online classes. So we are now racing towards a century, and we hope to complete it maybe very soon. And just to introduce you to the various innovations which we have been doing online, we have been having assemblies which our teachers have been presenting in a very interesting way. And we have covered a large number of topics, right from taking our students on virtual tours last year when absolutely travel was not allowed and a strict lockdown was there in the nation. We traveled with our students virtually to various countries, including Shaila ma'am taking us on a virtual tour of Antarctica also. So we had a lovely assembly session in that, and then we had assemblies on Samay Yatra, which took us into the evolution of time, calendars, clocks, and various things associated with time. And currently we are covering, conquistadors, that is the various explorers around the world and how they discovered various places in the world. And along with that, also virtual teaching has given us an avenue to reach out to our students who need academic support. And we have been giving special attention to the children who require more attention in academics as well as reading, and taking separate sessions with them so that we are able to bring them to grade level at the earliest possible. Teachers are designing very lovely game-oriented worksheets for students to understand concepts, and children are really so excited by them that every day we see them competing with each other on the leaderboard to try and do better than themselves, also to improve their time. And we have introduced coding in our computer classes right from grade 1 onwards, so that the teacher is teaching them how to work in these times of technology, how to be abreast of technology. And we always celebrate all the national and international days through various Facebook posts, wherein our students are doing a lot of speaking and recording videos, and they have begun to speak with such confidence that we ourselves are finding it amazing to see the changes that children have undergone over the last few days. And our Facebook page is a testimony to the various events which we have been hosting on Facebook. We have also taken on inviting various guests to our assemblies and arranging guest lectures. So you are one among those. We've had a veterinary doctor who spoke, an environment enthusiast, and we had an Air Force wing commander who spoke to us and our students. And now we are privileged to have an archaeologist who is speaking to our students. This year we have taken on the mission of having as many guest lectures as possible to expose our students to different kinds of different areas, where they can focus on and learn more and widen their horizons of knowledge. So there are a number of other things, but I think the day is yours. We are all here, sir, to hear about archaeology, and I'm sure our students are very curious to ask you a lot of questions. So let's begin with our guest lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was very good to introduce me the way you have presented, and I'm happy to know that your school is really a very upcoming school, and it's got a name for itself through the audiovisual program that you're holding. I'm sure your technical assistant, Mr. Krishna, is doing a good job there. So the three of you I have met and I'm impressed. So now talking about archaeology, all of us know archaeology, all of us romanticize archaeology, and all of us know that it is linked with history. Once you get the subject of your interest, then you will flower. I'm basically a science graduate who shifted to archaeology and heritage so that I could understand the culture of India, the heritage of India, and compare it with what is happening in the West and bring it back to my system. That is my job as an archaeologist. So many times what I feel bad is that when we talk about archaeology, we don't think of India. We think of Egypt, we think of Greece, we think of China, we think of Mesopotamia. Why is not India also focused in the field of archaeology? Because we are making it as a subject of history. We always make it a narrative which is not interesting. But now with this audio-visual media coming in, people are able to travel. People are able to go out of the classroom. People are going to the field. So we are moving away from the historical concepts that are taught in a monotonous manner to visuals. So it is the visuals when you see, when you go to a site. Why do you like to go to a picnic? Why do you like to go to an excursion? Because you're seeing things around you. You're feeling the environment, you're feeling the temperature, you're feeling the other people around. So that is what is archaeology. So archaeology is not in the classroom, but archaeology is out there in the field. Now with this PPT, now with this electronic media, we are able to visit the site and see for ourselves what exactly is happening and how we reconstruct history. So archaeologist ultimately also contributes to history because it is interpreting the past. So that's our story, and I'm going to start my presentation, which will be what is archaeology. Very simple. You people are much smarter than what we were when we were in school. You all have got smartphones, you all have got computers, you press a button and you have it. So initially when I'm starting my presentation, the first half will be talking a little bit about archaeology. Then I'll be taking to a case study to show how archaeology is enacted, how we interpret archaeology at a site. So first we start off in a serious manner about the subject, and then we open up and go to the field. So the first slide is taken from an English book from a British author. You see how they make it lively. I've not come across many Indian books which are pictorial, but now things are changing. Everything will become pictorial. I think in next 5 years, everything will be more graphic than what it is right now. At any point of time, teachers can ask me a question to clarify if I'm not very clear. So the definition is, what is archaeology? As usual, the archaeology word comes from a Greek that means study of what is ancient, what is old, what that is, in other words, what has passed. Now we keep hearing of fossils. We keep hearing of artifacts. So there's a difference between fossils and different between artifacts. Fossils are the remains, or bone remains of a living organism. An artifact is what is artificially made. So a human being can become a fossil. Like in Jurassic Park, you have seen a fossil remains. So a fossil at one time was a living organism which has fossilized, whereas artifact is what is artificially made. So who makes it artificially? Only a human being can make things artificially. So the difference between fossil and artifacts are, one is natural and other is man-made or human-made. So an archaeologist is someone who tries to figure out what is life was in the ancient past, looking at the remains, which could be either fossils or artifacts. So we archaeologists reconstruct the past by looking at the remains, what have been left behind. So in the past when the people were living, they were very much like us. You see in my house, in my this study table, I've got books, I've got a table lamp, I've got a pen in my hand and paper on which I'm writing. So similar things in the past, 10 years back, 20 years back, 100 years back, 500 years back, even the people who were living were utilizing, were living, were cooking, were eating food, were hunting animals, were going out, meeting friends. All this can be reconstructed by the remains that what you find in the field. But all the remains are not preserved in the field. Only some of them are preserved. And those some of what has been preserved is excavated by an archaeologist, and he studies by first understanding what he is surrounded by and trying to generalize that what it must have been like that in the past. So what is a site? We keep hearing that I've gone to a site, I've conducted excavations, I've found it. What is a site? Site is a place where an archaeologist explores. So generally when you go out in the field, you have a mound, a undulating surface. There you have got certain clues which shows that something could have been buried. So when we start digging, when do we dig? Either to make a house we dig, or to bury something we dig. But when we dig, we come across, sometimes we find some remains. Like presently if you dig, you will find plastic. But if you dig still further, if there was some earlier cultures, there will be a remnant of those earlier cultural remains at the site. It could be a broken bangle piece. It could be a coin of that period. It could be anything of that period. And it is for us to understand and to lay a context and write historical record of that period. So archaeologist goes to a field, digs, excavates, and then what he gets, he tries to study as to which period it belongs to. So which period? Now we all know that in the present form what we are is the contemporary period. But before that we had a historical period, and before that we had a prehistorical period. So now what is history and what is prehistory? History is a period in which a human being had learned how to write, and the records that have been left behind either by in form of writing or in form of engraving or in form of painting is the historical period. But there was a period when man did not know how to write. So he lived mostly out in the jungles. We all romanticize him living in a cave, yes. Having a fire besides him, yes. Hunting animals, yes. So that is a period called the prehistoric period. So now let us, just for our understanding, maybe not exactly wanting to know, but just to give you an idea that human civilization underwent different phases of its growth. So the earliest phase is what we call the lower Paleolithic, which in broadly speaking all around the world were from 4 million to 1 million years old. This is the broad division that man was living in the Paleolithic period. So within the Paleolithic period we had this lower, middle and upper. Then as man evolved, his tools became more advanced because he was making use of stones. Stone was the element, material that is naturally available, whereas metal was discovered much later, for which we need to smelt and for which we need to have a technology to extract the metal from the ore. Then comes the Mesolithic period, then the Neolithic period, then the Chalcolithic period. Just to give you an idea, the church of St. Augustine was a very massive church, and because of lack of care, and when the Portuguese ordered the dismantling of the church because the church property was confiscated by the Portuguese in 1835, the church went into ruins and slowly the church started collapsing. And this is one of the image of the church before the front facade of the church collapsed in 1931, and later in 1938 only this remaining bell tower is visible. I was just talking to a ma'am. She said she visited this place 2 years back and she saw the ruins. And you see, this is where the archaeologists work. So when I and my team went to this area to work, it was completely in ruins. So where can you excavate? Where can you locate the site? Because we had no information as to where the remains of the queen were kept. We only knew that in 1628, two fathers of the Augustinian order had brought the remains of the queen and kept embedded within the church complex. And within the church complex, it was kept someplace and the full church has collapsed. So it is just like searching for a needle in the haystack. So from where can you find the bones within such a big heap when you've got no clues where to look for? Then we got a request from the Georgian. By then the Georgia had become an independent country because in 1922 the Georgians became a suzerain state of the Soviet Union, and only in 1991 they became independent. But the Georgians in 1624 when the queen was captured by the Shah Abbas I, and since the queen did not convert herself to the Christian faith and she resisted the advance of the Shah, she was declared as a saint. And now the Georgians requested the government of India, they wanted the remains of the saint to be given back to Georgia, because the remains that was there in Georgia have all been lost. So there's no evidence of the remains of the queen in their own country. But they came to know that in India, there are remains could be found within the Augustan complex. So they requested officially in 1998, but before that, the religious order from Georgia were already interacting with Archaeological Survey of India to search for the remains. So the story goes that from 1988 onwards, the search for the queen is going on in India in Old Goa. And this is a layout of the excavation what we have done in Old Goa. And the first team, that is called the first phase 1, there you got a small image of the previous people searching for the remains. One on the right is Dr. Sharma and on the left is Dr. Joshi. So when they got the information and the request from the fathers from Georgia to search for the queen, they started the excavations to search for the queen. Can you imagine a small bone piece, the bone piece of a hand, which was brought to India, kept within such a wide area of nearly 5 acres, and where can we search? It was a very difficult question to answer. But still, archaeologists wanted to locate that, and the team that was headed by Dr. Sharma was searching for it. But one advantage of this excavation that was going on in Old Goa was that once you cleared the site was being preserved. So the ruins what you find in this has become like this after clearing the site. And now what we are doing is that we are searching for the remains, but there is no place to know as to where it was kept. But the record said that the remains of the queen were buried under the second window of the church. Second window of the church? Which church? There are 5-6 churches within this complex. Which second window? So it was very difficult task for us to search for it. So different teams searched for it, but they could not locate. Our team took over in 2004, and I was told when I took charge of Old Goa by other researchers that one should search for the remains of the queen because there's a request from the Georgian government to search. I was of the opinion that my predecessors, the people who worked before me, the 4 teams, they were all great archaeologists and they could not locate the site. So I was not really interested in search, me or my team was not really interested in searching for the site because we were wanting to preserve the site. An archaeologist is also a person who excavates and also preserves. If you don't preserve a site, the site is destroyed. So we have to preserve what we excavate. So I was basically concentrating on preserving the site. And this is the area where we started our excavation. When we started our excavation in this area, you can see this chapel that is written there. After excavation, we found this. We found a tombstone which mentioned the name Manuel de Siqueira. And Manuel de Siqueira is a tombstone and the coat of arms which was on the floor of the chapel. And when we were excavating the site, we had a full team of archaeologists who were basically Indians who had not much reference about the manuals or the documents what were there in Portuguese. I know Hindi, I know Sanskrit, I know English. But to decipher something in Portuguese language, we need a person who knows Portuguese. But luckily at that point of time, we had an exchange student from Portugal who was working with us. And when we excavated this tombstone and got the remains of Manuel de Siqueira, he was saying that he has read about this reference. I was surprised. The site is completely covered by mud, by debris. We are excavating 2004 and we get these remains. And when we're getting these remains, how can the remains be referred in some document which has been published? So we were not aware. We are archaeologists. We were excavating. So when the historians said there's a published material which was published in 1958, which had reference of the tombstone. So now we are doing archaeology in reverse. Generally, we read about a certain thing, and then we go and search and find. We have a map in our hand, we go and search for a treasure. But here, we found the remains of an tomb, and then we're searching for a document what is written. So it's archaeology in reverse. So the reference of this thing is mentioned in the publication of Silver Ego, which was published in 1958, much before we excavated. On 90 and 92 in volume 12, there is a mention of the tombstones that are there in the church. So we go to the tombstones, and then we're excavating, and when we see the documents, we are comparing the two. Whatever is mentioned in the documents, we are getting at the site. So we got it first at the site, then went to the documents for reference. After getting the reference, we again went back to our excavation and verified each and every information that was mentioned in the document. So it's archaeology, history, and back to archaeology. So our subjects are interlinked. So when we excavated the site, this is the in progress. This is not actually an excavation. It is basically a scientific clearance falling down, and the roof had all collapsed. So you can see the debris that's collapsed. Is one of them. That's me, way back in 2004. This is my wife Shika. We all work together. This is our technical team, local resources who were working at the site. So when we were excavating, we came across a lot of remains, inscribed tiles. Some we could identify, some we could not identify. So many things when you don't cannot decipher, you should take the help and support of people who know. One should not try to hide your ignorance by saying that I don't know, so I will not interpret it. There are many people who have studied. I could be an archaeologist, but I am not an epigraphist. I'm not a person who knows about writing. So I have to contact the people who knows about the subject and then try to build up a story, narrative around it. So we are showing the people who have come to the site, who are from the Christian order, whether they can help us in assisting of what we have found. So this is a mention which I say is indirectly showing reference of Queen Ketawan, that tile which is found in fragments, which is pieced together, indirectly shows that this could be a place where the remains of the queen must have been kept. So after referring the documents and verifying at the site, we are taking our next step and trying to interpret what we found at the site. But the bone remains of Queen Ketawan were not located by us during our first season of work. So what we concluded after the first season of work, that the remains of the queen were very important for the people who were living here. And when the church was went into ruins, the people who were to leave this place must have taken the bone along with her, along with them. But later we found out that we found a bone piece fallen in the ground when we were excavating this chapel. And this chapel remains are mentioned all in the document of Silver Ego. The bone what we got at the site was not exactly at the place where it is supposed to be. It was not at the second window. It was fallen down because when the roof collapsed, the bone got dispersed. So how can I say that this bone belongs to the queen? Though because of historical record, because of archaeological excavation, we had located the place where the bone must have been kept. But we got the bone out of context. So if any other person will say, they will try to connect. But when you try to connect, you should always have a logical reason and scientific explanation as to what is the link. So the bone what we got at the site has to be interpreted. So when the Georgians came to know that we found the bone at the site, and this was published by the newspapers and it was published all over, they were very excited. In 2006, we found the bone in 2005, and in 2006, the Georgian team came to Goa, and they said, okay, you have found the bone and this bone belongs to your queen. For you, she's a queen, but for us, she's a saint. So kindly hand over the remains for us, because in Portugal, in Georgia, we have made a very big church, and within the church, we want to keep the remains. Now you see, the emotion of a priest and the emotion of an archaeologist is slightly different, because they want the remains to be kept for veneration, for prayer, because she is their saint. For archaeologists, she is a historical figure, a queen, and the bone what we got was not exactly at the place where it should be. So how can I and my team falsify the data and say this is the bone of a queen, though most probably it could have been, and it became later it was, but without a proof, without a study, we cannot say that this bone belongs to the queen, Ketawan. So what was next? So next thing what was there is to take up ancient DNA studies. Ancient DNA is a clue. When you study the remains, you can isolate the ancient DNA, mitochondrial DNA. Then you have to identify whether they have got any remains of the ancient DNA in the bone, because the bone is there out there in the mud, in the sediments, in which a lot of leaching can take place, and the ancient DNA that has been extracted has to be amplified, and after amplification it has to be sequenced. After doing all this thing, you need to have a matching remain. So how can you do all this thing without having a matching remain and then say this belongs to the queen? The first thing, that ancient DNA extraction has never been done in India. It was being done in Japan, it was being done in Germany, but in Hyderabad we have a very advanced laboratory which is the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology. I think you all should visit the teachers. I'm requesting ma'am to get in touch with the director of the CCMB and go and visit them and study their advanced technique, what they are utilizing for extracting the ancient DNA. So till now, no ancient DNA has been extracted from any specimens from India because we did not have a laboratory. And after getting a laboratory, DNA can be extracted, but ancient DNA you have to follow a very stringent protocol. So my organization, Archaeological Survey of India, wanted me to consult Anthropological Survey of India, which is located in Calcutta, to get our analysis there. But since I am in Hyderabad and I know the people from CCMB, it's very lucky, it's just coincidence that I was working in Goa, belonging to Hyderabad, knowing the people from CCMB. So I approached the people from the CCMB, and the director at that point of time in 2006 was Dr. Lalji Singh, a very eminent personality who established the ancient DNA laboratory in CCMB, and later he became the Vice Chancellor of BHU. So now what next? I am an archaeologist and I've been trained in France in a French laboratory. There they have taught us that an archaeologist should not part with his samples. An archaeologist should work with his own samples. What happens generally in India? We are archaeologists. We send our material for C14 dating, carbon 14 dating to a lab. We have a bone sample. We send it to a lab for work. But in the lab, I'm not doubting the credentials of the lab scientists, but there are many samples, hundreds of samples are there in the lab. And the scientist who's working in the lab is slightly insensitive to a particular specimen because he's working on 100 specimens. So since I was working in French laboratory for nearly 10 months, and I proved my credentials to in the CCMB saying that I've got a background of biological science, which I again did from KB Pickett. And later I told them that I would like to work with the samples. They said, how can you work? It'll take a long time. I said, sir, I'm in Goa. It's not very far. On the weekends, I'll come and work. So though I was not allowed to come officially, I used to come on weekends, Saturday, Sunday, and work in the laboratory with our team. And we worked for a very long period of time because ancient DNA till now had never been extracted. And even if it was extracted, it was never amplified and sequenced. So two teams of CCMB were involved in this work. The first team that was for where we worked for 3 years from 2006 to 2009, we could only extract it and we have submitted our report to ASI. But we could not go to the next level because we did not have advanced kit. So later we waited for another year. Again, we started our work and again we worked for another 3 years. And finally in 2013, the date is there, we got our specimens studied, we got our specimens analyzed, we could sequence it and also finally match it with the specimen that is there in Georgia. Now, what is there in Georgia? The father had initially promised that he has got a very small specimen of the bone remains there, of which ancient DNA can be extracted. But later they realized that if you extract the ancient DNA, the bone specimen will be lost. And they cannot give the specimens to India. So we requested them to analyze the specimens in Germany so that we can match. But later the father said, no, we cannot do that. Is there any alternate? So we came up with an alternate, that the contemporary saliva samples of the present day population, if it is taken, the genetic sequencing of that, if you do, we can trace it back to and match it with the queen. So we got with great difficulty 50 specimens of the saliva samples of Georgians, and out of which only 30 specimens could be sequenced, and out of which 2 specimens match with that of the queen. Even if 1 specimen matches, it will give you the result. And then we published our results in an international journal called Mitochondrion. So whatever you do, we have to get an international acceptance for your work. The other journals did not accept our work initially because they said it is not possible to do in India ancient DNA sequencing. But it took us 1 year's time after identifying and working to get our specimens published. And once we published, then it was open to the people all over the world. They appreciated our work. And then finally, we concluded, and still we say that this bone specimen is of Queen Ketevan of Georgia. And still, if we can give us the specimen of the bone, what piece they have, then we can have a still further cross-reference, double check on the results what we have given. But it's not possible because they would not spare the specimens of the bone what they have. And now we also are not very sure the specimen bone what the Georgian people have in their possession is of the original saint, because the remains of the original saint has been lost and it cannot be recovered. So the bone specimen what is there in India is the only bone specimen of the Queen Ketevan which we have. And this later when we found this, their archaeologists came to India. They were very happy with what we have done. Their father and the community is very grateful to our country, our team in particular and the country in general. But we tell them it is because of the Archaeological Survey of India who provided us all the funds and support, we could do the research, though it took us 10 years and we worked for 7 years in the laboratory. But finally we could nail the results. And this is what we could get. And finally, this results we could get and published after working for nearly 1 year on the specimen to improve our results. And later the presentation was given, they invited us. We gave a presentation of our results in Georgia in an international seminar. And well, I'm just very briefly trying to put it across, but it was very painstaking. And many times we had really given up because we were not getting the results what we wanted. In excavation, we got the results. In referencing, we got the results. But in the laboratory, we could not cross-verify because we did not have the proper protocols. But luckily, me being in Hyderabad and coming over every weekend, and of which my wife was a little upset because I used to come only for 2 days, initially from Goa, then later I was posted to Bhopal. Still, I continued my research from Bhopal and used to come over, and we could do it very convincingly after our international publication. And what we have done is that whenever you excavate a site, the site is destroyed and the site is open air. So we recreated a diorama within the museum at the Old Goa Museum, and we have put a specimen of the bone there for the people to see, because everything is visual. Now, if you don't have a visual, if you go to a site, as ma'am has gone to a site, you will not know anything there. Even if you give you a literature brochure, you will not understand. So we have recreated what we saw at the site and put it up in the museum. Now, it may all sound very interesting, but it is not so easy. I'm individual. I'm a government servant. It is not like can travel as a private sector, go to any other country, take work with them. For every time we had to take due permission, we had to have our credential established. An individual had to go physically to work in a laboratory, had to move at all these places. But ultimately, all what we have done, we have been accepted that the work what was done in India is of international standard, and the remains of the bone are of Queen Ketevan. But still we request the Georgian people to give us the specimen so that we can cross-check. And this was the early team members that we used to debate, and the gentleman in the center was the one who had initially started the earlier excavation work in 88-89. and he was very happy that our team could do it. But what we wanted to go a step further, we want to convert the full site into an open air museum. So the site, instead of being only in a museum, the site itself can be done within St. Augustine complex, but it's not very easy. It's an open air site, and it was not always possible, and you don't have that much of funds to preserve the site. So what happens when we excavating the site? I just want to digress a little. We have got nearly 100 people working at our site. 50% are ladies, 50% are male. And along with the ladies, you must have seen, you go to any building construction site, you have got these small children running about and not being cared for. So we realized that if we can look after the small children at the site, the mothers can be more productive, because mothers are always wanting to nurture the child and they don't know what exactly the child is doing. So we opened up a small creche at the site so that the children who were there could be looked after. And then one of the lady who was a qualified lady, we call her name is Kanchan. So we engaged her to give the children informal education at the site so that the child are looked after. And we give them a very small nutrition, some biscuits and some milk, so that the child can study there, be with us, and then mother can be more productive at the site. And these are in contrast, I'm getting a public school like your international school. You people are really very blessed because of your parents, because of your teachers, that you have got a good institution to work, and you people are should get the best and you should give it back to the society. You see the contrast between the children what we have at the site, whom we are trying to educate, and the children like you. So now, after listening to our story, you take it forward and become scientists, become whatever field that you're working, and apply your knowledge to our science, so we can do some more discoveries like this and make our Indian archaeology more romantic, more acceptable to the people. Because people, when we talk of history, they say, oh yeah, it's so boring. No, let us make it interesting by working in the field and applying our knowledge. But what we do is that after working for so many years, whenever the people come to the site, we put up an interpretation center. If there's no interpretation center at the site, people will not know what is there at the site. We try our best to make a child, make a monument, relive what we call them adaptive use. So in the adaptive use concept, we have exhibition at the site to tell the people what exactly we found, and also try to recreate what a church was for. Church basically was a place where you have got prayers, where you have got choir music taking place. So we want to make it a living site. If a site is dead, if the site is not living, people will not have the feel for it. So we are trying to we have tried to experiment and bring it back to life. In the evenings, we have this, we want to retain the personality of the monument. We have got these music concerts there. We have got this orchestra taking place there, so that the people would ultimately not only go to the site like Basilica of Bom Jesus or say Cathedral, but and also come to the Augustine complex to feel the history, to feel the archaeology. And this is not easy, because this site is a very vast site. It needs a constant care. It needs a person with sensitivity to be at the site in charge, so that the people would come and respect the site. So an archaeological site should not be treated as a picnic place. My son was very upset with me when he was very young, because in the museum, when he used to come to visit me, I used to not allow him to play cricket. He wanted to play cricket and he would never come. Then for him, I had made up diorama, interactive dioramas at the site, and that's how we try to attract people. So a site should also be interactive for the children. We have got a small picnic place here where the child can be left alone there and the parents can go around and looking at the site. So this is what I would like to present, and I acknowledge all my team, people who have worked my institution, who work with me, and it's not easy. It's not easy working within a structure, traveling at all the places, having the contacts, working in the laboratory, and trying to publish the material after doing all this work. And I'm very lucky to have been blessed with the parentage that I got, because of the schooling I got, because of the colleagues I've got, and because of your school, where I can make this presentation and motivate you people to take this subject forward, so that most of us can apply our knowledge what we have for the field of archaeology, and to make India as a place where people would visit, not only just to have a picnic, but for heritage value. And there is a lot of scope for in India. And we have got many sites in India, whether it's Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Haryana, You go anywhere, we have got much more than what we can handle. That is why we have become very insensitive. But we want to preserve what best we can so that it can be passed on to the next generation and you can pass it on to your next generation.
Good day, sir. This is Grishma from grade 10.
Yeah, tell me, Ishma.
Yes, sir. How do you excavate a site and can be reverted as what is the process you follow when you begin excavation?
Actually, it's a very simple question, but the answer is not so simple. Because what happened, many times what happened, when we go to a site, we are not aware that it's an archaeological site. But as when you go a place of theft or place of a murder, some clues are always there. Something is always left from which we can identify. So when you go to an open area, a cultivated field, within the cultivated field, you see a person, a lot of potsherds are there. Pot, broken sherds, beads are there, bangles are there, coins are there. These are not in one place, they are scattered. So we start thinking that why are these broken pieces at the site? So there has to be something there at the site. How can broken pieces come? Okay, some people can throw the refuge. But what happens when we see a mound? Then we say, okay, let us take a trial trench. So before we take up any excavation, we make a trial trench to see what clues we have got outside. Is it really being present at the site when we excavate? And that's how we go about. This is a very general description of an archaeological mound and archaeological site. Many times, archaeological sites are not well preserved. That is why we don't have the full information. Luckily, what happened in Pompeii, because of the volcano eruption, the complete site was preserved. So you could excavate and get all that was at the site. Within India, we have got many sites that have been excavated, like Harpa, Mohenjo-daro, Rakhigadi, Dholavira. That's in news. So excavation has been taking place. The most interesting is the Nagarjunakonda. Go to Nagarjunakonda. The excavation had taken place there, but then they had to build a dam. So they salvaged all that was there from Nagarjunakonda Valley and shifted to an island museum. Please go and have a look. You will get a very good glimpse. You must have gone, I'm sure, of an island museum and how excavation was conducted and salvaged.
Hello, sir. Sir, what do you study to become an archaeologist?
Now, this is a very good question, and all of us should understand. You can study anything, whatever subject, and you become an archaeologist. That's why I just said in the beginning. Generally, people think if you study history, you become an archaeologist. If you study anthropology, you become an archaeologist. I would like to communicate with you, whatever you study, later after you doing your 10th class, 11th class, 10th, 11th or 12th or even degree, then you can shift to archaeology. So you don't have to say that I want to study for archaeology. You say you want to become an archaeologist by studying whatever you're studying. Then apply whatever knowledge you have got to the field of archaeology. When I was working in the laboratory, I was working with people from biology. I was working with people from zoology background. So even tourism, even historical people, even people who don't belong to archaeology can become an archaeologist. It's very simple. Just have interest in archaeology and you have to preserve whatever is there in our country.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Isha.
We have Sheikh Safina who has raised her hand. Yes, Safina.
Yes, sir. You said no, sir. You asked the Georgia people to give the specimen of the bone to check if the bone which you found is the queen's bone, no, sir. Did they give it to you, sir, at last?
Safina, कौन class में हो?
Sixth class.
Sixth class. Very good question. I'm happy that you heard what I was speaking. That's what is communication. Generally, I tend to speak very fast because I get involved in the subject. Safina, what happened? Initially, when we were working, they said we will give because we have got a small specimen, very small specimen. When I went to Georgia, I saw that. But what happened when you're working with the specimen in the laboratory? You have to break that specimen. So once you break the specimen, it is उनके saint का है, उनके भगवान का है. So they said if this is also lost, we'll have no tangible evidence to keep in our church. So initially they said yes, but later when we wanted to cross check, they said no, we will not be able to give because of this thing. So then we went to an indirect testing of testing the present specimen. Then we also requested them, suppose if the Queen Ketawan had ancestry to the present from the female side, even if they get the blood sample, we can match it. But it is not there because many people say we also belong to the Queen Ketawan's lineage, which may not be true. So there are many ifs and buts. बहुत मुश्किल लगता है इसमें काम करने में, but you have to be very objective. You should not believe everything. You should talk to everyone, say yes, yes, unless you do and cross check it yourself.
Sir, this is Himanshu from grade 7. Sir, what kind of historical objects have you found?
Well, generally when we are excavating at the site, apart from the bones, we found the remains of bangles, we found the remains of iron nails, because it is a church. There must have been a lot of doors there. We found bricks, and then we found a mold of a coin. I don't know how the mold of a coin came there. And mostly this was a place which was desolated. This was not there, but lot of potsherds we have found, because a lot of people were living there, and in the kitchen they were cooking. So we have found remains of domestic animals like lamb and chicken, and similar things we have found at the site. And all this thing gives a clue that this site at one point of time had a lot of people living in this place. So mostly iron nails have been found because of the doors that was there, but wood we could not find because all wood must have perished, all got pulverized. And at the site we found a lot of paintings on the wall, on the line, which is called a fresco painting on the wall, but which could not be preserved because of being in open air, because it rains very heavy in Goa. Yeah, and we are trying to preserve all what we have found at the site. Good question, Himanshu.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, do you like to study history right from childhood?
Actually, I was interested in history, and my mother used to tell me a lot of stories when I was your age about the Greek mythology, about the Chinese Great Wall of China, about what was happening in Egypt. So I was listening to a lot of stories. I was not reading history because basically I was a science student, and I heard a lot about stories through comics, through documentaries, but I never studied history. And it's only after graduation I started studying about archaeology. But my mother is responsible for me coming into archaeology by telling me very attractive and stories about the past.